The Giver, you may be saying, why would she start off her show with a kid's book? And I say to you, read it again, because it is not just a kid's book. One of the things I love about The Giver is that I have read it at 3 different times in my educational life. I read it in 7th grade as required reading for a 7th grade literature class. I read it again in high school, and then I read it for a young adult literature class in college. And each time I've come back to it, and that's not to count all the times I've come back to it just because I love the story, but each time I've come back to it academically, I have found new things that are super important to this book, and things in this book that are super important to us. It's a fairly simple story. It's in the genre of dystopian fiction, utopian dystopian fiction, and Lowry gives us this portrait of a world that doesn't have, well, it doesn't have color, it doesn't have love, it doesn't have any number of these things that we find to be essentially human. And then explores what we gain or lose from those things not being in our lives. I remember when I was little, one of the things that drew me to the book was that I was learning about this world as the character was. The main character, Jonas, doesn't know any more about this world than the rest of us. Part of that's because of his age, he's fairly young, but part of it is also because this world is so entrenched in secrecy and in making sure that people don't know the underbelly of what's happening, that it's just as much of a mystery for the people in the novel as it is for those of us going through it. I think that that's an amazing writing style. It allows you to feel like you're part of the story without the character being written to be a pretend you, as some books do. One thing that I commend about this book is that she makes sure that you learn things when she wants you to. She doesn't just give you the answers too soon and then have you watch Jonas figure out the answers. And you can guess along the way. I know I guessed a couple things before they were told to me, but a lot of it really is revealed to you almost as it's revealed to Jonas. And I think that's really great crafting on her part. So I want to read an excerpt from the book. I think it exemplifies what the book is about. I think it exemplifies what the story is about without giving any major spoilers away, because I don't want to spoil the book for anyone who hasn't read it. So here we go. When you become the official receiver, when we're finished here, you'll be given a whole new set of rules. Those are the rules that I obey, and it won't surprise you that I am forbidden to talk about my work to anyone except the new receiver. That's you, of course. So there will be a whole part of your life which you won't be able to share with a family. It's hard, Jonas. It was hard for me. You do understand, don't you, that this is my life, the memories? Jonas nodded again, but he was puzzled. Didn't life consist of the things you did every day? There wasn't anything else, really. I've seen you taking walks, he said. The Giver sighed. I walk, I eat at mealtime, and when I am called by the committee of elders, I appear before them to give them counsel and advice. Do you advise them often? Jonas was a little frightened at the thought that one day he would be the one to advise the ruling body. But the Giver said no. Rarely, only when they are faced with something that they have not experienced before. Then they call upon me to use the memories and advise them. But it seldom happens. Sometimes I'd wish they'd asked me for help more often. There are so many things I could tell them. Things I wish they would change. But they don't want change. Life here is so orderly, so predictable, so painless. It's what they've chosen. I don't know why they even need a receiver then if they never call on him, Jonas commented. They need me. And you, the giver said, but didn't explain. They were reminded of that 10 years ago. What happened 10 years ago? Oh, I know. You tried to train a successor and it failed. Why? Why did that remind them? The giver smiled grimly. When the new receiver failed, the memories that she had received were released. They didn't come back to me. They went. He paused and seemed to be struggling with the concept. I don't know exactly. They went to the place where memories once existed before receivers were created. Someplace out there. He gestured vaguely with his arms. And then the people had access to them. Apparently, that's the way it was once. Everyone had access to memories. I think that little excerpt shows just how well crafted this world is. This is a world where people don't have their own memories, they don't have their own ideas of what the world should be, because it's all been taken away in an effort to diminish difference, diminish the ability to have conflict. There are other things that happen in this book that are in an attempt to diminish conflict, but they're so dark and they're so frightening because it takes all the ability to choose out of the people's hands. And I still find that extremely troubling. In fact, I think I find it more troubling now than I ever did in 7th grade. The thing I found most troubling in 7th grade was release. And if you don't know what that is, I hope you'll read the book and find out, because I think you'll find that troubling too. But there are so many things about this book that are important and troubling. All right, I said in the rules that I couldn't just praise a book, so I have to say one thing I don't like about the book or that I find problematic, and this one's easy. The concept of a created receiver is great. The concept of a created giver is great. The problem is that Lowry never explains where this sort of magical gift for holding or giving, transmitting memories comes from. Other than this concept, the world is fairly normal. It's fairly understandable. We could even admit that it could be a way in which our world is today, just changed, like climate control, things like that, genetic modification for the inability to see different colors or things like that. But she never explains the sort of pseudo-magical properties of someone like the giver or the receiver. And I think that that's a shortcoming. And she follows it through in her other novels, where there are mildly magical elements that are never explained. And I just, as someone who loves fantasy and things like that, I wished she would have given a better explanation for why those magical elements fit into this world she had created. But other than that, I can't say that I dislike or find trouble with much else in the book. As an older reader and as someone who has read more dystopian fiction now, I think it's interesting that she discusses the political situation in the world very little. But I also understand why not, because a small child, the lens through which we see this world, would not have cared about the political situation or why the world had ended up this way. They would have only cared about where the world was going from there. And that's all I have to say about this one. I really hope that you'll respond. Tell me things you liked about it. Tell me things you didn't like about it. And get this discussion going, because literature is not to be read in a vacuum. Anyways, keep reading. There are so many stories to be told.